Loud. Okay, and Maya, you'll hit start webinar, or do I hit that?
I don't have a button for it. I
Okay,
don't think I'm.
so I'll stop my video and I'll mute myself and then I'll hit start webinar.
All right, works for me. All right, and I believe the webinar is now live. I'll give everyone a second to kind of filter in, but I can introduce you for a little bit. We have Dorie Stolley here with us today. We're super excited to welcome her back to NBTI. Super exciting presentation about egrets to eagles, introduction to wild bird identification. She's going to teach us a little bit about how to identify birds, using sounds, I believe, and color and things like that, especially, good for those socially distant walks when you can't identify the birds around you. I'm really excited for this one, so thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Dorie Stolley. The program today is Egrets to Eagles, an introduction to wild bird identification. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself briefly, and then about what we're going to go over, and then we will jump right into it. So I used to work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm going to show you a picture here. I got to do bird watching at really incredible locations. I was a biologist who studied birds, and many of you know what the term for that is, right? Yeah, an ornithologist. And I'm going to tell you two highlights of my work as an ornithologist. The first one took place in South Texas. You can see here, there's a person standing in a white shirt. I'm the person who's crouched on the ground there. And you can see in the distance some water. So I'm on an island. And can you see the cactus too? So I'm on an island in South Texas with cactus. How does that have to do anything with birds? Well, let me show you. We were looking for nests hidden under the cactus. Look at all those eggs. What bird do you think might nest under the cactus there? I'm going to show you. The black-bellied whistling duck. This was a highlight to me because I got to study them as part of work, and they're so interesting. And there was a mystery that we needed to solve. And the mystery was some of their ducklings, their babies, were dying. And why was that happening? And I could tell you a very long story about it, but I won't. I'll tell you the short story is that the water was very saline or very salty, and that was affecting the ducklings. And so we recommended some changes in management so that the water wouldn't be quite as saline, so that more of the ducklings would survive. So that was highlight one. Highlight two of my career, what could it be? Ah, there, that is me in that costume. That is the blue goose, which is the mascot of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I was so excited to be able to be the mascot. And I hope many of you have opportunities to visit your nearby national wildlife refuges. And I'll tell you a little bit more about them later. So why birds? Why do you think birds? Why birds? Why National Biodiversity teaching why birds? Oh, they're incredibly diverse. They're incredibly amazing, from the tiny little hummingbird. Look at that, with just a little bit bigger than a penny. The one we have in North America is only 3.5 inches long, and it weighs less than a nickel. So we've got tiny little birds all the way to the biggest bird in the world. Okay, think about the tallest person you know. Think about the basketball players that you see and how tall they are. This bird can be taller than that. An ostrich can be up to 9 feet tall. And how much do you think it could weigh? 9 feet, by the way, is 2.7 meters, in case you were wondering, or if you use metric. So how much can it weigh? 320 pounds. That's over twice my weight, almost 3 times how much I weigh. That's 145 kilograms. So birds are incredibly diverse in size and weight. Also, they can be super colorful, like this purple gallinule, very striking to see. And they can be adorable, like this baby piping plover out on the beach. And this is a bird that I got to see. Also, They can have great behavior, very interesting behavior, even family behavior to watch. Like this bird. Do you know what this bird is? This bird is found all around the world, actually. It's called the osprey. It's also known as the fishhawk. And here you see the mother osprey landing on the nest that she built. And if you look to her side, what she's looking at are the little heads of her babies sticking out. So they build this very conspicuous nest, lay eggs in it. They sit on them for, incubate them for a month, and then they hatch out. And as they grow, you can actually watch them from a distance with binoculars or a spotting scope and see them coming back and feeding them, seeing the baby birds grow up, and seeing them the first time that they learn to fly. So bird behavior also is really interesting. And then, of course, birds are just beautiful. These are ones that I can find. I am talking to you from Richmond, Virginia, what's considered the southeast of the US. And look at all these cool birds that we can see here and do see here. And no matter where you are in the US or in the world, you can see amazing birds. If you are in the country, if you're in the suburbs, if you're in the city, they're there for you to watch. And so that's why I love birds. So what I'm going to tell you about are the not so secret big 5 of wild bird identification. So if you learn these big 5, you are well on your way to be able to identify birds in the wild. Now, I do want to tell you, however, it's not important necessarily that you identify the bird exactly what it is. I mean, if you just like to watch birds, that's awesome. Just enjoy. You can give them a name in your own head. You can make something up for them. So while it's really fun to be able to identify them, you don't have to be able to do that. So here's the big 5. We're going to start with location. Ta-da. Okay, we'll talk about one of my favorite birds, the American robin. Every bird has its common name, like American robin, and then they have a Latin name. And common names can differ across the country and across the world, but the Latin name is always the same. And I always liked this one, especially when I was a kid, because I thought it was kind of funny, because its Latin name is Turdus migratorius. So when thinking about location, the first question you're going to ask is, what do you think it is? It's what's your location? Where are you? Now, if you look at this map, I've included on the slide, if you are in North or South America or Central America, Canada, you can find your approximate location on this map. Where are you? So you need to know where you are, obviously, and then you need to know what is the bird's range? Where is it likely to be? And if you have a field guide like this picture is from, you can tell. So take a look at the map, find out where you are, see what color it is, okay? So if you are in a purple area, you go down to the legend, read it. If you can see it, purple means year-round. So you're going to find American robins. Robins, you can find them year-round. If you are in the sort of orange color, that means you're going to see them in the summer. If you're in the blue, you'll see them in the winter. Now, if you look at the legend, there's one more color, and it's yellow, and it says migration, because many, many birds migrate. They go one place in the summer to lay their eggs and raise their young, and someplace else in the winter. And often they'll just pass through an area. So you'll only see them in migration a brief time during the spring and a brief time in the fall. So that's what the yellow is for. So your first question you're going to ask yourself is, where are you? And where's the bird? You know, what's the bird's range? Is it likely to be near you? So for instance, most of you, I don't think, are going to see a penguin unless you're at a zoo. So if you're looking at a wild bird and it looks like a penguin, it probably isn't. And if it is, it's super exciting and you should let people know. And probably it escaped from a zoo. So here's a tip. Mark up your field guide. All right, you could circle the birds in your area or cross out the birds or put an X by the ones that aren't found near you. And I'm going to show you a field guide here. Okay, so what's a field guide, you may ask? A field guide is a book that you can carry with you. This is kind of a large one. Many of them are smaller. I've got a large one just so you can see it better on screen. And it's a book you take into the field or when you go out to watch birds to help you identify them. And it has lots of pages of the birds. Whoops, I'm trying to get this up with the range map. So that map, like I showed you, is on the bottom too. Now, this one, can you see? It says, this one's actually a guide to all the birds of North America. So that's a lot. So if you don't want to be paging through, if you're in Virginia or Ohio or Illinois or Texas or whatever, then you can mark it up, put an X by the birds you're not likely to see if you want to. I think that really helps. All right, let's go back to the screen. All right, so location, that's location. Number 2 in the 5 not so secret tips is habitat. Habitat, I'm sure you know, that's where the bird lives. It finds what it needs for life in that habitat. It's evolved to do well there. So it finds its mate there. It finds food, shelter, materials for its nest and nesting site, and so forth. So why is that important? To know the habitat that the bird is likely to be in. Well, take a look at these 2 birds. They look pretty similar, right? They got that sort of gray brownish back, and they've got a collar marking. One of them actually has 2 collar markings in the yellow or orange legs. Very similar looking, but they're different birds and they inhabit different habitats. So by knowing where they're likely to be, you'll know whether you're going to be seeing one. So the one on the right, the one that has a very orange legs and also the little color band on it, is a piping plover, which is an endangered bird. And it's found on the beaches because that's the only place it's going to put its nest, is on the beaches. The other one on the other side with the 2 collar markings is a killdeer. And that's found all the way across North America. You might be able to see that where you live. They like sort of gravelly areas. And now they've adapted to present day life by nesting like on gravel roads sometimes, and in fields that have some gravel spots, and even in parking lots, sometimes in the islands and parking lots. And so if you are not near the beach and you see a bird that looks like one or the other of these, most likely it's a killdeer. And here is a fun fact. It is not called killdeer because it kills deer. It's really small. It's like this big. It's the sound that it makes. It sounds like it's sort of screaming in a high-pitched way, killdeer, killdeer, killdeer. More on sounds later. So habitat. It's important to know what sort of habitat you're going to find your bird in. Here we have a number of different habitats. One of my favorites in the top corner is the beach. You can also see desert. And there's a marsh at the bottom, and someone's backyard with some bird feeders, and then another backyard without bird feeders, but likely to have many birds in it too, because it has a lot of different plants, trees, and shrubs and stuff for the birds to use. So here's a tip. If you do have a field guide, you can add some notes in it for the habitat. So birds found near houses, you can just write yard next to it, or if you are near the desert, you could write that, or woods or marshes. That's very helpful. Put down its habitat. All right, so the third of our 5 ways to help you identify wild birds is behavior. So birds' behavior, it includes a lot of different things. Well, I'm going to talk about two things behavior, and that's about how the bird flies and how it eats, because knowing that can help you identify a bird. So how it flies, its flight pattern. So does it flap its wings quickly or slowly? Does it do 2 and then stop? Does it go up and down as it flies, or does it fly in a straight line? And is it gliding a lot on the thermals? Does it ride the hot air thermals and doesn't need to expend a lot of energy? It's a lot of things about flight pattern. So the tip I have for you is to learn the flight pattern principle song and sing it often. All right, I'm going to show it to you first, and then we can try and do it together. Okay, so are you ready? Okay, let me get back a little bit here so I'm ready. Okay, flight pattern principles song. Wings in a V for a vulture, wings straight out for a hawk, never in a hurry for a seagull, always in a hurry for a duck. All right, now it's your turn to practice. Let's go back here. All right, are you ready? Let's sing this song. This will help you out. Wings in a V for a vulture, wings straight out for a hawk, Never in a hurry for a seagull, always in a hurry for a duck. Excellent. I am sure you did a great job with that. You can take that home and show everyone what you've learned today. So moving on from flight, let's think a little bit about eating and feeding behavior. Everyone's seen some birds eat, right? Let's talk about a couple examples. So if you see something that's eating, that's taking nectar from flowers, what's it going to be? You're right. Yes, a hummingbird. There are a few other birds that will take the nectar from flowers, but here, especially in North America, it's going to be the hummingbird. And that's the one that drinks straight from the flower. Okay, if you see a bird on your on the lawn or on a field and your schoolyard or something, and it's digging up worms and it's eating them, or it's taking them to its nest, what is it? Yes, that's our American robin. Yep. Okay, if you see a tall bird with long legs, it's near the water and it grabs a frog or a fish. This one's got a fish. Yep, great blue heron. That's what they're likely to get. And if you're in the busy part of town or in a city and you see a whole bunch of birds flock down and they're on the ground, like to feed on the ground, and they may be eating handouts. That's right, the city pigeon, also known as the rock dove. And by the way, you shouldn't feed the birds. Not good for them to eat human food. Okay, so moving on to the fourth thing, which would be appearance. The appearance of the bird, the size and its shape. Well, a good way to start is to look at the silhouette of a bird. You don't even need to see the details to identify a bird. If you know your location, you know your habitat, you know how it eats or flies, you know what its silhouette looks like, you don't need to see any details. So for instance, this is a big bird, I'm telling you, and look at its silhouette with those broad, powerful wings. Yep, you got it. This is a hawk. All right, and next, what's that one? Bet a lot of you see that one. I'm telling you, that's a medium to sort of a little large, medium, large bird. That's a crow. Next silhouette. We've talked about this one. This is a smaller bird, not tiny, but small. That's a robin. And what's that? It looks big here. It's not quite that big, of course. That one's our hummingbird. And that one, then that's not the accurate size, of course. That's its silhouette. Long legs, long neck. Look at that long bill. Yep, that's our great blue heron, or it's possibly a great egret. They're very similar birds. All right, and last one on our quiz. What's that one? It's a tough one. You got it. Right. That is not a bird. That is a bat. A bat is a mammal. It doesn't lay eggs. It has its young live, and it also provides milk to them, and birds don't provide milk to their young. Oh, excellent job. Okay, here's the final one. Dun, dun, dun. What is this silhouette? Many of you have a chance to see this because this bird is found all across North America. Look at that big body, big head, and those little tufts on its head. Yes, the great horned owl. It's a good silhouette to look for at twilight. And those tufts, they're not horns. They look like horns, especially in silhouette, but they're just tufts because its ears are located further down on the sides of its head. So they're just little holes on the sides of its head, and those tufts actually help to direct sound down to its ears. Okay, so with appearance, we can also look at color and markings, and that's super helpful with some birds, right? For instance, this bird, well, if you didn't know anything about birds, maybe you don't know this bird, but what would you call it possibly? Yep, this one is a bluebird. Name for that lovely color. I get to see these. How about this one? Yep, blackbird. And it's actually a red-winged blackbird. I always want to say red-shouldered blackbird, but that's not really right. It's a red-winged blackbird. And this one's found in Texas. Can you tell what it is? It's a woodpecker. It's a golden-fronted woodpecker, and that's because of that yellowy spot right above its bill on the front of its head. So those are some great things when birds are named after what they look like. It's really helpful, right? Now, if you really want to get into the details, and I don't recommend this as a beginner, but maybe as you move up, you'll be interested in it. There are many more markings you can observe on a bird. And for some birds, you do need to look very carefully at these markings to know exactly what it is. And you can see all these different names of the different parts of the bird. We're not really going to go over that, but I just wanted to let you know that that's something that some people will get into, and you might. So the final one for our 5 things to consider when identifying wild birds are sounds. So how do you tell a fish crow on one side from an American crow on the other side? I'm going to stop sharing so you can see this. Okay. So the way you do this is by sound. So they look almost exactly alike, but the fish crow sounds like this. Uh-uh. 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 It makes me laugh every time I hear that. I don't know why. It sounds funny to me. American crows kind of more serious sounding to me. It's, ah, ah, ah. So that's how you tell them apart. Okay, let's go back. Our slides here. So we can tell a fish crow from an American crow now. Excellent. What bird is this? Oh, okay. I have another bird to share with you. Okay. This one. It's important that you get prepared to do these bird imitations. Okay. Okay. I got that one? What do you think that one is? I think probably you got it. That one, yes, indeed, is our great horned owl. And, oh, okay, I have another one. Okay, here's another one. Now, I'm going to warn you, you might want to turn your volume down for this, especially if you have sensitive ears or if there's someone in your house this is going to bother, because this is going to be really loud, okay? Give you a moment. Turn down the volume. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what was that one? Let's go back to the pictures. What is that bird? That's one that I've heard. Because there we go. What is that? That's the Peregrine Falcon, the fastest bird on Earth. And that, the sound I made is the sound of the female. The female is bigger than the male and noisier. And that's one of the sounds that she makes when she's communicating with her family. So in terms of bird sounds, my recommendation is learn a few species at a time and then apply your knowledge. So let's say maybe you'll listen to a few, you can Google them, you can listen to their sounds and then go outside and practice. You can also go outside and look at a bird, right? Find a bird, find a robin or a bluebird or anything, and then listen to what sound it makes when it, when you see its bill moving. And sounds can be just so much fun. So we have gone over the big 5 of wild bird identification: location, habitat, behavior, appearance, and sounds. And so my advice to you now is to go birding. No matter where you live, you can go birding. Even if you're inside, if you have a window and you can look out on a place where birds come, you could do that. You can do this during COVID. Obviously, these pictures were taken pre-COVID, but you can go out and be socially distant. You can also mask and be socially distant and go bird watching safely. And you can have so much fun with this. I highly recommend it. Here's a couple of useful websites. The first 2 are great information on birds, and you can get the bird sounds there and their range maps and interesting facts. And then the third link is how you can find a wildlife refuge near you. No matter where you live, there is a refuge nearby. And in most places, they're within easy travel. And you can go there on the wildlife refuge and go birding and enjoy nature. So now I am going to take some questions. All right.
All right, I have a question in the chat here. These are beautiful colors of birds. Some birds don't have the same colors, even if they are the same species. How can you tell what type of bird you are looking at if the animal is not fully mature / might not be in colorful plumage?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. Yes, I did sort of simplify things for you. So the details are that some of the many birds, the male and the female have different plumages. In birds, it's the male who's colorful because the females go choose their mates, and they like colorful birds. And the females are on the nest, so they're often in cryptic colors. And cryptic means that they can just hide easily, fit in with their surroundings. So they are usually not the bright colors. Then also, oftentimes the young birds have a different plumage or feathers, and that changes as they get older. So the question is, how can you tell? Well, I guess the thing I use the most is my handy dandy field guide, because in the field guide, let's get a good one here. Oh, here's the killdeer. That's pretty similar. Let's try the Mongolian plover over here. You can see, what you need to see is that there are different colors, different plumages of this bird. Whoops, I'm trying to, this one. And so your field guide can help you with that. You can also go online, and that's really fun to do, is to go online and look at pictures. Or you might have a Facebook page where people identify birds, and you could post a photo that you take and people identify it for you. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. I'm going to grab a couple questions off of Facebook here. Let's see.
While you're doing that, I see a question. Do you have a book or documentary recommendation? Also, thank you so much. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for attending. And would birding be good 4-H project? Absolutely. For 4-H, it's such an awesome 4-H project, because you can bird watch, but then there are also projects you can do to help conserve birds and help with bird habitat. You can make bird boxes, for instance, and let's say you make bird boxes for bluebirds or for tree swallows. You make bird boxes for tree swallows, they nest in them, and then they eat insects. So they might eat mosquitoes that are in your yard. So it's like you're helping the birds and the birds are helping you, which is a really awesome project. Yeah, there's lots of materials online. A book or documentary. That's, Donna, why don't you email me at Dorie@3birdsconsulting.net and give me a few more details, like what you're interested in, what age group or what type of book. Is it a reference book or a book to get people interested in birding? And I'll be happy to answer that. And any of you out there, if you do have questions, email me at Dorie@3birdsconsulting.net. And Dorie is Dorie. And 3 is spelled out, 3birdsconsulting.net. And I'll see what I can do to answer them.
Great.
So you had some from Facebook?
Yeah. Why are red-winged blackbirds so aggressive or seem so aggressive? I had one in my hair.
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I have to tell you that when I was younger, I worked on a study of basically just this question. And the red-winged blackbirds that you see are the males. The females, as I said, are in many species are cryptic. And red-winged blackbird females look like sparrows. They're brown and black striped. They're very cryptic, and they don't sing like the males do. The males sing to attract the females and to protect their territories. And they are aggressive because they are scaring potential predators away from the nest sites. So they'll go after crows and birds, even people, if they get too close to their nest. And I have a funny story to tell you, because I worked on a project where we studied the blackbirds, and we were interested in these aggressive behaviors. So what we did is we had a stuffed crow on a pole, and we put it out in the marsh with a covering over it, so like a blanket over it. And we backed away till we were hidden. We had a string attached to the covering. We pulled the covering off, and then we watched to see if the male red-winged blackbirds would attack this stuffed crows, like, non-living. And they did. And they attacked it so much that they took all the feathers off of the back of its head, and we had to replace them with a bird toupee. So.
That's funny. I have a couple more here, kind of related questions. Do you need binoculars to go birding?
Ah, that's a great question. No, you don't. And I actually recommend you start without binoculars, particularly if you're young, because your eyesight is like super awesome, really great until you're about 17 and then it starts to go downhill. So a lot of older birders, actually, they get like their friends and kids and grandkids, nieces and nephews to go with them. And they have the younger people spot the birds without binoculars, and then they'll identify them. So you don't need them. I recommend for your first pair of binoculars, you could even use a pair like this. This is my favorite pair of binoculars. All right, made for me. Always important to put string around your heads, you don't drop them, out of toilet paper rolls and highly decorated. But the reason, I'm sort of joking, but have serious, because with these, you learn some of the most important things about using binoculars, which is to pay attention. So if you see a bird, you look at the bird and you raise the binoculars to your eyes like that. That's the hardest thing to learn. You don't need binoculars, with magnification to learn that. And then you look at what you see through there, you pay attention to it. And you can actually also learn to follow a bird as it flies. And then if you want to get binoculars, which are fun, binoculars are fun to use if you want to see tiny little details, you can. But honestly, it's best to start without them. And then, if you want to get them, go ahead and get a pair of binoculars and it can be fun.
Mm-hmm. So what equipment do you actually need if you are a beginner?
Well, I was going to say you need eyes, but you don't necessarily, because some of the best birders are blind and they just go by hearing. So you need to be perceptive. You need to have some birds around, but almost everywhere you're going to find some birds around. That's all you really need. I'd say if you're going to be walking outside, some walking shoes and your mask if you're with other people. And then as you move along through birding, I highly recommend getting a field guide. And there are various field guides. Well, I showed you the Sibley, National Geographic does one, Peterson. There's tons of field guides. Some you can find, if you can find a local field guide, that's really nice. Say birds of Illinois only, because it won't be as heavy. And then binoculars are nice to have, and a notebook and pencil. So you can start taking notes on what you're seeing. It's great to put down the date and the weather and the habitat that you're in, and then the birds you see. If you don't know what they are, you can sketch them. And you can take some colored pencils with you if you enjoy doing that, and then come later, try and figure out what it is. And as you progress, you can also have a spotting scope, which is like a telescope. It sits on a tripod. And that can be fun to use for birds that don't move around too much, like Osprey in a nest. That's very cool, but it's not necessary. So very little equipment is actually necessary to go birding.
Awesome. I have a question. What is more interesting to you, looking for patterns or determining cause and effect?
That's a good question. And let's relate it to birds. I'd say they're both interesting. I would say maybe I'm drawn into cause and effect a little bit more because there's a bit more of a mystery in that. And maybe you have to have a little more patience to look for patterns, but they're both very important. So if you know about a bird's patterns, of course, you can learn something that's applicable to the entire species, and that can help you in conservation. Cause and effect, though, is important if there's something affecting a species, but you don't know what it is, and you need to find out what is the cause of it. Yeah, very interesting question. I'd like to know who asked that and what their answer would be to it. So if you want to email me, that would be interesting. I'm seeing here some questions. What bird careers are there? And there are a lot of different bird careers that you can start with when you're first starting out. A good thing to do is to get experience in the field. So with wild birds, there are studies that go on. So people study the birds or projects for bird management and conservation, and you can find out about those. And then there are careers with state agencies like Department of Conservation and Recreation or Fish and Wildlife. Different states have different names for these agencies where people work with birds, preserving birds, also hunting birds. Some people love to hunt birds, and there's jobs related to that. And of course, zoos and aviaries need people, but there are many, many careers with birds. So has birding been difficult due to COVID? Well, some has been difficult, like bird tours where you go with a group have been curtailed. But if you want to go on your own, obviously it's a great thing to do with COVID, because you're outside, you can get some exercise. You can do it by yourself or with one other person and be socially distant. You know, if you want to go in pairs, that's fine. And the birds aren't going to give you COVID and you're not going to give it to them. So it's great. So birding is a good thing to continue with COVID. So someone's telling me that there's a bird identification app called BirdNet that IDs bird calls. Do you have other apps like this that you would recommend? There are other birding apps. Merlin, MERLIN is one. That's I don't use that much, but a lot of people love. I'm just personally just don't use apps a whole lot. I can't answer this question really well beyond Merlin, but a lot of people love the bird apps. Oh, another one is eBird, and that's a great one to use for reporting your bird observations and for finding out what's been seen in an area. E is just the letter E, bird. So if you want to go birding in a particular spot, you can look up beforehand what you're likely to see, what other people have seen. So that's a good one. And I'm sure there's many others that I don't know about.
Absolutely. And then somebody on Facebook also added on that there's a lot of different Facebook pages for birding too. Great info.
Yeah. Good point. So many different ones. Some for your state, some across country, rare bird observation. There's one on bird misidentification. That's kind of a funny one. So yeah, check on Facebook. And there's great bird photographers. I love seeing the amazing photographs. That's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite wild spot to look for birds? Or do you have a story about one spectacular birding adventure?
Wow, what a question. There's so many excellent birding spots. I love where I'm living now. I'm in Richmond, but I'm near the James River, and there's a lot of different habitats here. And so I love to sing the common birds that are around. Like, I don't have to see anything unusual to be really happy. There are a lot of bluebirds right now, and you saw from the picture how pretty they are. Oh, and you might want to look this up if you have a field guide or Google it. Pileated woodpeckers. They are so cool. So they're found around here. I saw them, and they're giant. They're like woody woodpecker. They're really big, and the noise they make when they bang on the trees when they're looking for food or making their territorial noises is really loud. So let's see, I'll tell you one adventure that I had, because I worked for Fish and Wildlife Service for 12 years as a wildlife biologist. Now I run my own business. It's called 3 Birds Consulting, and I do communication and outreach. So many of my adventures were as a biologist. And one day my boss said to me, they need help banding pelicans. So you saw that one picture I showed you of the piping plover. I mentioned it had rings on its leg. It had an aluminum band and it had a color band. The aluminum band is a Fish and Wildlife Service band, and it has an identification number. And then the color band is so you can identify that bird while it's still alive. Like, you don't have to read the number on it. You can look at the color combination. They'll have different colors, bracelets on them or rings. So we were just putting the aluminum bands onto pelicans, and they're big bands. And I said, okay, sure, I'll do that. So I went down to North Carolina. We were going to this colony to band them. And then they told me, guess what? Oftentimes when you get the baby pelicans, so obviously would be hard to get them when they could fly. So we were getting the babies before they could actually fly. But when you catch them, they often throw up on you. And what have they been eating? Yeah, you're right, fish. So when they throw up on you, it's sort of a stinky mess. So it was a successful day, though. We banded lots of pelicans, and it was a little stinky, but it was totally worth it.
That sounds great. Is Is there a commensal relationship where you say, oh, I see this mammal or insect, so we should look for this specific type of bird?
Oh, yes, there are examples of those. That's a really good question. Well, maybe I can answer it the other way, though. That's what's coming to mind at the moment. I know there's plenty of examples of what you're talking about, but I'm thinking about when you go whale watching and you see a whole bunch of birds. Sometimes it's gannets, sometimes it's gulls feeding in an area, and then sometimes you'll see a whale come up because they're feeding on the same fish there. So by seeing the birds, you may know that you're going to see a whale afterwards. So that's kind of interesting. Well, there's something that it's not an animal. Where I lived in Massachusetts, out on the beach, there were these plants called bayberry that have these little berries on them that have wax, and most birds can't digest it. So when we saw birds come in and feed, we knew that they were either tree swallows, and they come in great numbers, or yellow rump warblers, also known as myrtle warblers, that feed on them. And I'm sure there are many examples of what you're talking about. They're just not coming to mind right now.
I have a question. What's the best way to feed birds?
What's the best way to feed birds? That's a really good question, because a lot of people, they want this interaction with wildlife, and a lot of people would just love to go down and feed the ducks at the park, and they take them bread. And that's not a good way. That's not good, because number one, human food's usually not that good for animals. It doesn't provide them the nutrients that they need. It may actually be bad for them, like white bread's not great for birds. Second, it gets them to depend on people for food. And let's say you're feeding seagulls, they might start attacking other people to get their food. And then it also might cause birds to stay past the time when they should be migrating. So birds, basically, people think, oh, birds migrate because it's cold. And that can be part of it, because birds can get frostbite. But the bigger reason is because they're going where they can find food more easily. And so if you keep a bird up north by feeding it, and it gets super cold, it could die from hypothermia, or if you stop feeding it, might not be able to find food. So those are all things that you shouldn't do. But the question was, what should you do? And that's a better question, because it's positive. So how to feed birds? The best way to feed birds is for them to not know that it's coming from a human. You don't really want them to associate food with humans. So putting bird feeders out is a super thing to do. You can put out feeders for suet, which is good for woodpeckers and a lot of other birds. You can put out sunflower seed. You can put out oranges, orioles like oranges. You can put out mealworms for the bluebirds in the summer. And you can also, if you really want a close interaction with the birds, you can, some people will put like a scarecrow out in their yard with its hands out. So they'll put, make it look like sort of a human with the stuff a shirt and pants, and put the hand out, and they'll put food on the fake hand. And then after a while, they'll go out and sit totally motionless, wearing the same clothes as the scarecrow does, to try to get the birds to feed out of their hand. But in general, I don't recommend trying to get birds to come to you to feed, because not all humans are going to be safe. You're safe, but not all humans are going to want the best for the birds.
That's a fair point. I'm not sure if you answered this question earlier. If I just didn't mark it, would birding be a good 4-H project?
Yeah, I did answer that, and it's a super 4-H project, or any kind of youth group project, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, if they still have those. They just call it Scouts now, but Scouts, yes, birding is a great project for that. And there's lots of online materials about it. Highly recommend it.
Awesome. Do you have bird watching spots in Massachusetts that you would recommend?
Oh, there's so many great bird watching spots in Massachusetts. Yeah, so I was on the coast, and I loved in Plymouth, the beach areas were really great. In the wintertime, if you can look at the water, there's lots of sea ducks, and they're very colorful ducks, and they're on the water, so they're like not hiding in the trees, so they're easier to see. There's national wildlife refuges like Monomoy, Parker River, one in all across Massachusetts are different wildlife refuges. There's Audubon preserves as well. Wildlands Trust has preserves. So Massachusetts is really lucky because there's a lot of different natural areas that are good for birding. And if you look online, you'll find some trips that are led, or you'll find guides to the different areas for birding. But also anywhere. I mean, just open your door and go outside and go bird watching. It doesn't need to be a separate area because the birds are everywhere. I had a friend who loved to go to a particular McDonald's to go to in the back by the dumpster, unfortunately, but around back, because there was a certain bird that liked to hang out there that was unusual. So, and when I'm driving on the Eastern Seaboard, I'll look up and I'll see a bald eagle. Bald eagles have come back. They're all over. They're big birds. They fly and cover a lot of distance. You can be driving on the highway and there's a bald eagle. So there's all sorts of birds all around. You really need to open your eyes wherever you are. You don't need to go to a special destination. But if you do want to, yeah, check out all the Audubon spots, Wildlands Trust, your town conservation areas, your national wildlife refuges, your state parks, your national parks, all areas like that. Find.
All right, I have another Facebook question. What is the rarest, most exotic bird you've seen in person?
That was in India, in Bharatpur. I saw a Siberian crane, and I think there were only like 9 of them left at the time, at a distance. So that was the rarest one. And I also I did the Peregrine Falcon e-chip call. I worked on the East Coast years ago. There was a chemical used for insect control called DDT. It's since been banned, but it got into the environment, and it's what we call biomagnified. So as it went up the food chain from like insects to fish to bigger fish to birds, they got more concentrated. And so when birds ate it, it made their eggshells thin. And so that's why the Osprey numbers went down, because the eggshells were thin. And so the eggs broke and they didn't survive. And the same thing happened with the Peregrine Falcon. And so there were no more Eastern Peregrine Falcons. And then when I was in college, they decided to bring some in and reintroduce them. It's called when you take a bird back to where it was historically found, but no longer is, and you try and get them to breed in the wild again. And so I worked on this project to reintroduce the Peregrine Falcon in Maine, and it was very, very exciting, and it was successful. So there are now Peregrine Falcons breeding in the wild in the eastern US, and there are also Osprey are also a success story, because in the 1970s, when I was growing up, you hardly ever saw an osprey. It was really rare. But because this chemical that was so bad was banned, DDT, and because people also put up nesting poles and platforms for the birds to build their nests on, they started to come back. So really what's so great about these stories is that we can make a difference if we understand what the birds need to survive and thrive. And then we as humans are willing to change our behavior a bit so that we can coexist.
Absolutely.
Oh, here's a question. I got a question here. What would you do if you see a bird abandoned or injured in the wild? So oftentimes people pick up animals that they think are abandoned, but they're not actually abandoned. So for instance, occasionally birds will fall out of the nest before they can actually fly, but the parents are still coming back and feeding them. And that happened where I lived when I was living in Virginia previously. It was with some wrens, and 3 of the baby wrens could fly and 1 couldn't. And the parents came back and fed that baby bird for a few days until it could fly. So the first thing is to observe carefully to see if the bird is really abandoned. And then if it is, what you want to do is get online and Google for a bird rehabilitator or abandoned wildlife, and see if you can find someone knowledgeable who would come get that bird. if the bird's, seriously injured and it's like a cat about to attack it or something, and you can tell it's injured, you can, sort of last thing to do would be to get a box and put that bird in the box and close the top of the box and keep it in a quiet area that's, room temperature, not super hot, not super cold, and contact that bird rehabilitator or local agency that will help with abandoned wildlife. And then Lindsay, if you have anything to add, why don't you type it in the chat and I'll make sure to mention it.
Absolutely. I live near the Kishwaukee River, and this summer there was one all black duck amongst the common ducks. Do you know if black ducks are common in Illinois?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess not, but let's look at our handy dandy field guide and see the black duck. Well, so black ducks look a lot like mallards, but here on the East Coast, there are some areas where their numbers are declining, and across their range, a black duck might be quite uncommon. A person who knows about birds would be able to easily identify that it's a black duck and not a mallard, for instance. But I recommend having a look at your field guide to see how common they are. And then sometimes the birds, they'll be considered rare, but it might be that they're just rarely seen. So you're just not in the right spot to see it, or, there's an occasional one, but most people don't have an opportunity to see it. So it's always fun to see something that's rare. But I also enjoy seeing all the common birds because they're common, and that way you can see them a lot and also observe their behavior, which is so interesting. So here's a question. Are there any 4-H bird kits or information? I don't know. I imagine there are. I know the Scouts have packets, badges that the kids can do. And so I'm hearing from Lindsay, who is helping to answer the question on rehab. Lindsay says there are many rescue groups who focus on rehabilitation, which is, helping a bird or animal get better, as well as wildlife centers that could offer advice on what might be happening and the best course of action. The most important thing when coming across wildlife, however, is to leave it alone until you have direction from a professional. And she is so right with that. Most people, we all intend to do well, don't we? We want to help, but most time we don't fully understand the situation and could be actually harming the bird or other wildlife by stepping in and doing something. So as I said, unless, you see a bird with an obvious broken wing that a cat is about to pounce on, the best thing really is to leave it alone until you know more and you can talk to someone who can advise you on what to do. Thank you, Lindsay.
Absolutely. Yeah, Facebook question. My dad says to always use black oil sunflower seeds. And I always wondered, are there really different kinds of sunflower seeds?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was just reading up on sunflower seeds because that's what I always heard and that's what I always use. And black sunflower is high quality. It has a lot of good protein in it and is very good for the birds. So I would stick with the black sunflower myself. One thing that the hulls can do though, is that around your bird feeder, they may inhibit plant growth. So if that's something you don't want, then you can buy the sunflower seeds without the shells on them. It's more expensive. I like the kind with the shells on them because I like to watch them, try and break them open and so forth. Black sunflower seeds are a good one. Your your Audubon Society, your local Audubon Society might sell them, and your garden center and feed stores. I think I've seen them in Home Depot. So there's a lot of places that sell them.
Absolutely. And I'm not seeing any new questions coming up, so we can definitely hang around. But I thought you'd like to know that there's a lot of commentary happening on the Facebook feed talking about how we'd all like to start birding, and there's a lot of beginners out there who are scared or don't have the resources or the company to do so, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. Just get out there and start looking at birds. And then if you want a community of people to go birding with, lots and lots of towns have birding groups. that get together and they run field trips. And some of them are running now. Some places are doing them in a COVID safe manner, but certainly soon people will have more of these field trips. And if you are a younger person, some places have young birders clubs, but also if you go with the older group, we love having the kids come along because it's so much fun to teach what we know and to see a new person's excitement about seeing something for the first time. And plus the younger people have the good eyesight. So don't be afraid to join a group that's mostly adults or people who aren't your age, because birding is for people of all ages. And it's a great way to, connect the generations and work together on that. So just go out there and have a good time.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice for people in areas that breeding isn't very popular or common for starting any groups?
Yeah, well, I would say just start going out there on your own. Try and get your family members to go with you or take you places. You can always combine activities, do a little birding and do a little something else. Find a friend who's also interested in it, and check out your online resources, because there's probably someone, somewhere around, or a group that's not too far away where people are birding. But it is something you can do on your own, and then you can connect via Facebook with different groups, with different communities, social media, eBird, some of the apps, and you can have an online community if you're not able to have sort of an in-person community.
Very cool. There's a variety of opinions about using hot pepper birdseed to deter squirrels or other pests. Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I don't know enough about it. I've heard, I'd like to know if that works. But the interesting thing is, like chili pepper, like hot pepper that tastes so hot to us, the birds don't taste it. It doesn't bother them at all. So if you put this in your bird seed, the birds aren't going to care. But some people, apparently squirrels, it might keep the squirrels off, but I haven't researched that. I don't know, but I think it might be worthwhile looking into, because squirrels, a lot of people want to keep the squirrels out of the bird feeders, right? Because the squirrels like the bird food too, and they can eat a lot of bird food. Some people will just say, I'm feeding the squirrels too. But other people try to keep the squirrels off. I found the most useful thing to do is if you have your bird feeder on a pole, you have a baffle on it. And a baffle is a cylindrical piece that fits over the pole. And the cylinder is closed at the top and open at the bottom. So the squirrel runs up the pole and it's inside the cylinder, and it gets to the top and it bumps into something. And the cylinder is wide enough that it can't get around it. But I have to tell you, I had this in Massachusetts, and there's this bigger than normal squirrel that was able to grab around the outside of the cylinder and get its way up to the top. So I smeared oil on the cylinder and made a big mess, huge mess. But the squirrel was not able to get up because of the oil that I put on there. Yeah, try that out with the hot pepper bird food, and let me know how it goes.
Is there any reason why, other than, scarcity of food, is there any reason why birds and squirrels wouldn't be able to share a feeder?
No, I don't think there's like diseases passed between them. I think most people just don't want to be feeding the squirrels because they go through a lot of food and people consider them more common. No, feed the squirrels. Some people do delight in watching the antics of the squirrels. You don't want to probably increase your rodent population by too much. Squirrels might empty a feeder out and cause the food to go on the ground, in which case it could attract other rodents if you have rats in the area or whatever. So that might be something to consider. But yeah, no harm will come to the birds from the squirrels eating their food, or vice versa. Although occasionally you'll see some very interesting interactions between the squirrels and the birds. And depending on the species of bird, either the squirrel's going to win or the bird's going to win. That's interesting to see. And I haven't seen anything like dangerous, like blood drawn, just some sort of bluffing actions and a little bit of upset behavior.
Well, we have a couple minutes left. I'd like to invite anyone else who has any, final questions to get them in. But I mean, if there's anything that you'd like to talk about that you're like, oh, I wish somebody had asked about this, feel free.
Yeah. Well, certainly. Read someone saying, thank you so much for your expertise and photos and stories, and you are very welcome. It's such a delight to share this with you because I get so much pleasure out of bird watching. I guess that's my final message is it's just so much fun. It's everywhere. You can do it anywhere. If you're sitting in the car waiting for your parent or spouse or someone to complete something, you can look out the window and there will be birds. Even driving down the highway, look up, there could be a red-tailed hawk perched on a light pole or a tree over the highway. There's everywhere you go, there are birds to watch. They're beautiful, they're interesting, they're diverse. And we can also learn about them and learn how to take care of them and conserve them so we can coexist and we can, well, all, humans and all these different species of birds can live together.
Absolutely. And then another thank you so much. So
oh, you're very welcome.
all right. Well, I mean, if there's not anything else coming in, then I'd like to thank you so much for joining us again for
You're
NBTI,
welcome.
and I hope we see you back again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Keep up the great work of this program. National Biodiversity Teaching is such an exciting thing, and I can't wait to watch some of the upcoming programs myself.
Thank you. No, we're super excited to keep going. This is, our first day this year, but we have a full month of cool events and programs and people joining.
Yeah, great. And thank you for your work too.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hi, Dorie. Thank you. You're awesome. I'm going to send my video of me doing your song.
Oh, I'd love to see that. Okay. Bye-bye.